I'm Becca Hanson. It actually says you when I look at my little tile up there, and you is me, actually. So I'm the board chair of Friends of the Farms. I've lived here on the island for, well, almost 40 years now, and have been working with Friends of the Farms for about the last 8 years. And we've got some really great ideas that we'd like to share with you. Meanwhile, my executive director, take it away, Heather.
Hi there. I am Heather Berger, and I am the executive director of Friends of the Farms. I moved to Bainbridge Island 23 years ago from Chicago and have never looked back. And I joined Friends of the Farms about 5 years ago in February and have just loved every minute of it and the opportunity to talk with wonderful people like you and to share with you the work that we're doing.
All right. And I see that it looks like we have the presentation. The board has worked really hard over the past year. We're going to kind of give you a description of both what Friends of the Farms is doing generally, as well as specifically on this concept of a food forest. But one of the things we've done is we've re-upped our mission statement. And so what is really important for us is that we're ensuring the future of local farming. That is so important, that we keep our farmers working and that we keep our lands under production and we make life possible for them. But equally, to build a healthier community. And we're going to do that through the creation of a resilient and an equitable food ecosystem, as we call it. So an ecosystem is everything, all the pieces that tie it together, which includes purchasing and production and education and all of those things that food systems actually touch. So we're really excited to get started on this. And as you go to the next one, then Heather, you can keep up on your own version of the PowerPoint. We call this presentation The Growing Community and Resilience on Bainbridge Island. Next animation. And what we're going to talk to you is a series of gardens that we're actually doing. So besides all of the work we do on keeping farmers on the land and intern housing and policies and regulation work, we're doing three very concrete projects. One of them is called the Farm School Garden, and that's so new that we don't even have any real photographs of it or plans or a logo for it. The food forest is something that we've worked on for a long time now, and we've got a couple of those in mind. And then this idea of creating within a specific piece of land that we lease from the city and manage pollinator meadows to help with native pollinators and making sure that they have places that they can live and contribute back to agriculture on the island. Next. All right, so we'll just go through these and it'll wind up in 3 pictures, Reed, that in defining some terms, all farmers are looking, well, not all farmers. It's a combination between personal success and commercial success. So the commercial farmers on the island absolutely have to make a living from this. For those of us who are gardening and growing things, whether it's for our individual families or for Helpline House, there's personal success in this. And one of the things we're going to talk about is ecological success. So making sure that not only are we growing the food well, but we are increasing the productivity of the natural systems that agriculture actually depends on. And so you'll see lots of terms that go around. Each of you will have encountered these: organic, biodynamic, biointensive, and then there's 3 more. Read permaculture is a term, forest garden, and finally food forest. So each of these is, in essence, a different way of looking at the same problem, and they all try to keep soil productivity, biodiversity, and the health of the water systems that we all depend upon first and foremost. But one of the things that happens in permaculture, forest gardens, and food forests is it looks to replicate the natural system of trees, shrubs, and ground cover, each of them growing in different ways and contributing to the overall health. And so if we go to the click 3 times and we'll get photographs. Very intensive gardening, farming on the bottom left, but that's all monocultures within plots of land. And then the other 2 photographs where you see a real diversity happening within that garden, that's where this concept of mimicking nature and bringing in trees and shrubs and herbs and perennial plants and all of them growing together within what is in essence a more natural type of garden or a food forest, if you will. Next slide. Now this, for anybody who wants to know, photographing food forests is really difficult because you're down and in it. It's like trying to be in the middle of a forest and photographing the forest. It's really hard. But if you look at it from the air, this is a great permaculture food forest farm in the UK. And you can begin to see all of the beds that are laid out. You can see a lot of trees in one area, which are the canopy that stands over a shrub layer that has then another ground cover layer on it. And each of those garden areas are going year round and are tended by a whole bunch of different people that come through. The concept for us with this is that these are not a series of gardens that are walled off from the public, much like many of the agricultural plots within our community are now, but these are plots that are open to the public to wander through, to nibble their way through, to forage their way through, and that we get the community involved in it as both an educational and as an sort of an engaging outdoor work experience. Next. Next slide. There we go. Heather, you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, so I wanted to give you guys just a little bit of background and history about Friends of the Farms and about the public farmland property. Since 2012, we have managed 5 properties for the city of Bainbridge Island under a 30-year lease that we have with them. And each of the 5 properties kind of have their own unique attributes. Some of them are more like the Day Road farmland is kind of more predominantly commercial agriculture with leases for farmers that are growing food, although there's also some trail networks and a historic area and a wonderful watershed. The headwaters of Manzanita Creek start right there on the Day Road farmland. There's also housing on Morales that we manage. And so we'll talk a little bit more about the 2 areas where we're thinking about food forest, one of those being the M&E farm and one of them being Johnson Farm. I think ready for next slide.
All right.
So there is a long and just wonderful, rich and diverse history of farming on Bainbridge Island. The gentleman some of you may recognize on the lower slide right there in the front is Akio Tsuyamatsu. And Akio's family purchased the Day Road farmland back in 1928 in Akio's name. He was 8 years old at the time because at the time, Japanese-born immigrants were not allowed to own property in the United States. And Akio farmed that property until his death in 2012 at the age of 90. He and his family were interned at Manzanar during World War II. And upon his release, Akio then enlisted in the United States military and went to war himself for our country, all of our country. Akio mentored some of the farmers who are still growing on the land today. Karen Silvar started farming with him when she was only 8 years old. And we have a wonderful picture of her sitting in the back of his tractor and picking strawberries and learning what has become just a wonderful and successful business of her own. And Akio's legacy lives on today through those farmers, many of whom you see in that picture. Karen and Betsy and Brian all mentor their own farmers and the next generation. And so one of the parcels out near Day Road, that 13.5 acres that Akio farmed, is the future home of the Bainbridge Food Forest.
All right, next slide. All right. And so given the fact that we have these professional farmers working on the land and their rich history of sharing with one another, we really wanted to expand that and to take advantage of their knowledge and take advantage of the fact that we have some great farmland that we want to get the public out and working on. So we want to create more spaces and programs to get the public involved. We want them working with the farmers. We want educators involved. We want a volunteer force that's out there working and participating with us. And we want them to become educated consumers as well as engaged participants. Next one. There we go, talking about educating our youth and families. They're the next group that are going to come along, and they are either going to know what happens with farms and farmland and farmers, or they're not going to have any idea. And it's up to us to make sure that we're continuing to educate them so they understand how important that is, and particularly for us, talking about keeping it local, reducing our carbon footprint, keeping local food close at hand. So, when the bridge falls down and the ferries sink, whatever it is, we have resources that we can draw on in this rich legacy that we have to us. Next slide. And taking care of our natural systems. As Heather said, the Day Road farms are the headwaters of Manzanita Creek. And what I always like to say is that Puget Sound starts there. And our care of that land while it's being farmed, while wildlife are using it as corridors, while the native vegetation is filtering the water as it runs down into Manzanita Creek, the Manzanita watershed and Manzanita Bay, all comes under our stewardship. So it's growing things for people to eat, it's growing things for the animals to eat, and it's all working together. Next slide. So we're going to show you a little bit about what we're doing. This is a map of the Day Road Lovegreen public farmlands. The white spaces in there are public or private inholdings. There's perennial vintners down in that crazy little four-sided parcel down there, which is Mike Lempriere's property. Right in the middle is Gerard Bentron's property that has Bainbridge Island Winery on it. And immediately to the north of Gerard's property is Betsy Whittick's property, right in the middle of the public farmlands. And so down on the bottom, where the little yellow squares are, and those all represent leased acreage that we lease out to the farmers with all of the farm names on them. That's the Morales property. The green squares in the middle are the former M&E Tree Farm and the Crawford property. And at the top of the map with all of the larger areas, that's the Benchroom Tsuyamatsu public farmlands. And those of you who go by on Day Road, which runs at the top of this, look out and over the pumpkin patch that Karen Selvar makes for us every year, as well as Betsy Whittick's grapes that grow on that property. In the top right corner is the former Akio Tsuyamatsu farmhouse and barns, and that has been put under city heritage designation, and so there will be ongoing effort to try to preserve that. But if we hit the next advancement, all right, Heather, you want to talk about? Hang on, go back one. There we go. Heather, you want to talk about the Victory Garden?
I would love to talk about the Victory Garden, and that when we think of the public farmland, you might think of, just commercial farms, but there's a lot more going on there for our community as well. At the Morales farm, we have a farmer on a half an acre, and for many years now, he has been growing and donating 100% of what he grows to Helpline House. And this year in March, when the pandemic hit, I was talking with Maria Metzler, who she and I used to be the co-chairs of Bainbridge Prepares Food Resilience team, and just what she was anticipating the needs would be in our community. And she said, there's always a shortage of fresh fruits and vegetables, but we're anticipating, that things are going to get worse for everybody, and we're going to need a lot more. And so we started thinking about, well, what can we do? Why don't we at Friends of the Farm start a Victory Garden project? And so we not only, with the help of some of the commercial farmers, plowed up a piece of land that had been underutilized, and we planted our own Victory Garden with all kinds of fruits and vegetables that would produce over 3 seasons. And every week we harvest and we donate everything that we grow to Helpline House. It's been amazing. And then as a part of that, we started a public kind of education program. And boy, I heard from people every week, this is so amazing. I want to start my own garden. I have a little plot of land and I can't do it, but is there somebody who might want to come and grow vegetables? And it was, plant a little for yourself, plant a little bit for the community. And in that way, we were able to support helpline and more people here.
And next animation, Reed. So our next series of projects on the M&E tree farms are what we call the Pollinator Meadows and the native food forest. So this is one of two food forests. And the two red circles represent the area where about 2 months ago, month and a half ago, we had all of the blackberry and Scots broom that was growing in the open areas on the M&E Tree Farms site mowed down in preparation to create pollinator meadows in those areas. I think those of you who have walked over on the Moritani estate, the park over there, have seen the pollinator meadow that got established there this year. And this is an expansion of that. So being so close to all of the farmlands, our goal is to preserve the habitat for the native pollinators, as well as the birds that really rely on the habitat around the edges. And so part of what we want to do is, yes, make the habitat possible for the smaller creatures to use, but then around the edge of it, if you think about planting edible plants, salmonberry and the evergreen huckleberry around that, so that you basically have a foraging perimeter that anybody can come onto this property and kind of munch their way through it. And that we begin to replicate the natural processes that this land once used to host all of the time. So that project is ongoing right now. And then next animation is our newest project up near Akio's farmhouse, is what we call the Farm School Garden at Tsuyamatsu Benchroom Farms. And the goal there is to create a real working, educational, diversified, hands-on experience for school kids, families, young kids, old kids, things to be involved with and learn from people who are actually doing the work and participating in that. I mean, we've kind of joked with one another on Friends of the Farm, said, gee, wouldn't it be great if we could change the child labor laws and we could get kids out harvesting the strawberries again, put them back to work. But we haven't figured out how to do that one yet. So this is the next best thing. Stay tuned on this. Next animation. Oh, there we go. The two little yellow asterisks appeared, one at the bottom and one at the top. And what those represent is another project that we're working on now, which is to get intern housing and young farmer housing on the public farmlands. We're working right now with Matthew Coates and I just lost their name, Clark Construction, as well as Housing Resources Bainbridge, to renovate the Morales farmhouse and to create what's called the Rehome Project, 3 independent sort of bedroom-like units that are made out of recycled housing to help support the farmers, interns, when they come to learn from them and work on the land. And then the asterisk up at the top near Akio Tsuyamatsu's farmhouse is the concept of a farm village, which was put forward when the land was originally purchased and as part of the goals, practices, and policies to be able to bring young farmers who can't afford to rent or to own on this island, and more farm interns to work with the farmers and learn from them into a living situation where they can continue to learn from one another. So we have both of those initiatives ongoing as we speak. And next slide. Now here's Johnson Farm, which is an immense piece of property. It circles way back from Fletcher Bay Road on the right-hand side, back through the ponds and into the forest beyond that. And this is a series of animations, Reed. So if we go to the first one, the things that we have there now, we have a series of pea patches that we organized there. We have, next animation, Heyday Farms rents from us a large patch of ground that they're constantly growing on. Vireo Farm just started a new farm there with hydroponics on it, and that should be up and running by this summer. And we have an old orchard there that we're working with the Fruit Club to get whipped back into shape because it had been not paid attention to for a long period of time. And so what we're looking at, next animation, is to take that whole upper area. This is the farmland that Harvest Fair occurred on, so that it's an upper terrace up above what used to be the gravel quarry. And there we want to expand the pea patches and expand the freely forageable experimental food forest garden at the periphery. How do you like that for a name?
Mhm.
It's an open landscape with fruit trees in it. It has a rich assortment of grapes that are already growing there. So we've got fruit and grapes growing there. And what we want to do is to expand a gardened area in there that lets people know about what I was talking about earlier, about creating multi-layered gardens that have trees at the top of them and ground covers below. And so if we go to the next slide, there's some images about what this might look or feel like. So you think about how experimental you can be with a number of these things by getting volunteers into this, about establishing plots and planning on how you're going to attack this, about getting volunteers to work with you, about having fruit trees combined with grasses and with vines to create this rich series of gardens that demonstrate different types of gardening styles going along with this press towards a more biodynamic, organic food forest sort of approach. And what we'll do as we get started on the design of this is we're going to bring in a number of permaculture experts, a number of landscape architects on the island, a number of passionate people who can contribute their knowledge to how we can learn from the land and take what it's trying to tell us about where it's sunny, where it's shady, where it's wet, where it's dry, where the soils are doing what, all those things that need to go into the design of a garden. And then we're going to get some wild and creative people out there to work with us on the implementation of this. So you can begin to see what a wonderful assortment of things that you can do. We even envision that artists will be involved in this, because obviously we'll have gates, we'll have various other things, we'll have benches throughout this. And so given our community and the resources that we have available here in terms of creative people and people who are passionate about gardening, we feel really confident in being able to pull together the food forest at Johnson Farm, the native food forest at the M&E Tree Farm, and to get started on and to implement the farm school garden at Benchroom Tsuyamatsu. So there you have it. That's what we're doing.
Oh man, that's fantastic. I love the way you said, let the earth or let the garden speak to you, instead of, humans trying to make the land into what they want. It's like, listen to where the sun or the shade,
Mm-hmm.
and the kind of soil, and we listen to the land.
Yeah.
So
And what's interesting is, there are efficiencies that are demanded in agriculture by people who have to make their living from the land. And so you have to respect that, but those farmers are working with the soil and with the sun and with the biodiversity around them. Every single farmer on this island works from an organic standpoint. But what food forests are doing is it's a little bit less efficient than that, and it demands some quirky approaches to being able to harvest from that. It hasn't been the kind of thing that in the past has been really productive and really efficient that you could make a profit from and live off of. But that one aerial photograph that I showed you of the food forest permaculture garden in the UK is really one of the first approaches to going, if you're doing it right, and if you're really focused on it, we can really change the way that we produce food.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, Ari had a question. Let's see. It just disappeared. Let me get it back here. It says, I'm curious about how you are hoping to include our suburban community to develop these techniques for our own personal gardening.
Well, I think, I'll leap in here, and then Heather, you too, that all of the techniques that we're going to be looking at here are just as applicable in a back garden, a front garden, any place that you would plant anything, that you can have a multi-layered approach to, beautiful things being around you, even growing calendula for flowers and putting them on your salad. is great, and that's right next to a squash with an apricot tree overhead.
It's one of the wonderful things about having both the Johnson Farm property and the M&E property be linked by or connected to the neighborhoods via trails and to the schools via trails, and not closed off, is that anyone can come to that piece of property at any time and observe what's going on. And, we'll have signage that will explain kind of the principles and what we're doing there, and loop all of that into the education piece of what's so important to us, and getting young people and community members out there to actually learn and be inspired by and go back and replicate things on their own land, or to gather together with their neighbors who might have, you might not have any space, but your neighbor might, and your own little community can start planting your own garden and sharing within, with one another, which is one of the things that Bainbridge Prepares was really excited about. Preparing your own, map your neighborhood and becoming a little more self-sufficient within that. So I think there's lots of opportunities for that.
Great.
I was going to say one of the great questions that we always talk about is that as farmers are trying to make a living, isn't it kind of self-defeating to have people plant their own gardens and therefore take away from what farmers are able to sell? And the real truth of the matter is that once people figure out how hard it is to reliably grow their own vegetables, they value the farmers even more.
Oh, absolutely.
And once you've tasted the most perfect carrot or perfect strawberry or, whatever it is, you want more of that. It's hard to go back. And so you want to go seek out those farmers, and you may not want to grow it yourself, but you want it.
Absolutely. Especially the what is that? Marshall strawberries.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
I never had a strawberry until I had a Marshall strawberry.
Yep.
Cool.
So true.
Yeah, every year. Are there any questions? You can open up your microphone if you have a question, or you could put it in the text box.
Yeah. Reed was mentioning about more of the island becoming a pollinator meadow, and we believe in that absolutely. I think, my professional life has involved a lot of traveling, and it's been over 20 years since I've spent a spring, summer, and autumn totally on the island, and, which I have loved. And I have spent more time in my garden watching the native bumblebees and watching the cycle of their lives, and they're rotating constantly. There's the early spring ones, there's mid-spring ones, there's summer ones, all the ground dwelling ones, figuring out where they go. And we have such a diversity of those insects that nobody is paying attention to. So we're going to do it, and we'll spread it throughout the island.
And there are things that no matter how tiny a space, even if you just have, a window box outside or a little spot on your deck where you can plant, just even if it's just one or two things that are that will attract different types of pollinators, and then these corridors get established. And I totally agree, Reed. All over the island, we want to see this happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a group called.
Oh, go ahead, Becca.
I was going to say there's a group called the Xerxes Society, for those of you who haven't run into them, and it's Xerces. And one of their regional headquarters is in Port Townsend. So they are kind of like the insect equivalent of the World Wildlife Fund, and they take care of insects all over the place. So we've been working with them on understanding what insects we have on the property and what we can do to actually plant a pollinator meadow that will work for the insects that we have here.
I live in a condo now, and we have a balcony, and we have a lot of pollinator plants and vegetables and blueberry bushes and a camellia tree bush, so we can get tea trees leaves. And but I remember gardening in the center of the island. We used to live there, and I would look around. First of all, the bees did not bother me while we were gardening. They were just there peacefully pollinating, and the variety. I mean, it was just amazing to me, the variety of bees that we have here on Bainbridge. Just stunning, just stunning. So.
We were talking about pollinators and habitat. Another just really cool thing, the Kids Have Audubon Society, through the Cornell Ornithology Lab, has created 2 what they call eBird hotspots. And one's on the Tsuyamatsu Benchroom property, and one is at M&E. And any birder can go there and start tracking throughout the seasons all the different species that they see come through. And there's well over 100 that they've found at the Tsuyamatsu Benchroom property already, and a couple of dozen, I think, that they've already identified at the Bainbridge Food Forest. So that's another thing. If you just punch in, eBird hotspot, you can go and see everything that's there. And if you're a birder, you can upload your own information when you see things.
Wow, I love that, because we have a lot of bird lovers here right now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I hope to see you all tomorrow. And Becca and Heather, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for making it possible.
Us.
Yeah.
Yes.